What's up, Dragon Brood? It's been a hell of a day, but we finally got here to day 9, I think it is. Not the person, but the day on whatever this is, Friday, February 4th. And we have the full set previewed, so that's the good news. It also means pretty much, I think, starting tomorrow until the set release, we're going to be putting out a couple of deck lists per day using the new cards. So it won't be a lot of gameplay footage, but it will be a lot of like deck text using new stuff so you can get prepped, and also fixing up your old decks with new cards. But for today, we're going to go over the last, whatever it was, 90 cards or so they got previewed. We're not going to go over every single one of them, but we're going to go over ones that look the most interesting or most useful for decks and whatnot, and cover those. And at the end, we'll just give a wrap up on how we feel about all the cards in the set going forward. I have a feeling today we're going to be covering a lot of commons and uncommons, because that's what a lot of what was released, but a lot of it is good quality stuff like this. The Imperial Recovery Unit, it's a 2 colorless and a white for a 3/4. Imperial Recovery Unit attacks, it's a vehicle by the way, return target creature or vehicle with mana value 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand and crew 2. So it's going to be very easy to crew with damn near anything. And it's going to keep getting to return things that cost 2 or less back to your hand, which is great because usually those things are probably going to be your pilots that are dying, and you could get those back and then be ready to pilot the next thing. So this is actually pretty good, and it's a 3/4, so it's a reasonable size for 3. I kind of like this. This is another one that could probably be a 3 of or something in a lot of these different vehicle decks, just from the size, first off, but also because it has a pretty good upside on its ability. You know, I just had a random thought that vehicles are actually pretty good against the white aggro decks because their best removal actually are the 3-mana creatures, the Apparition and the Brutal Cathar, that actually are trying to exile creatures. But if your vehicle, I guess they could still use Apparition to get rid of a vehicle, but wouldn't really be able to use Brutal Cathar. So, something to think about. Anyway, Reckoner's Bargain. This is a colorless and a black for an instant. As an additional cost to play this spell, you sacrifice an artifact or creature. You gain life equal to the sacrifice permanent's mana value, and you draw 2 cards. This is really good in a lot of different decks, right? You could be playing Pest still and sack those. You can always sack your Eye Twitch or your Shambling Gas or whatever. And what's wild is you're gaining life and getting 2 cards. Now, I don't know if this is better than playing Village Rites or Deadly Dispute, or like, we have so many cards in this space, but this is at least another option. And because it's an instant and you get life, it does have a different couple of modes of flexibility that the others don't have. So there's that, but just something to think about, that this card could get some play depending on what type of deck you're trying to play. All right, Reckoner Shakedown, 2 colorless and a black, sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it. If you do, that player discards the card. If you don't, put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature or vehicle you control. This is kind of some interesting flexibility, right? Because you get to choose any card from their hand and make them discard it, but, well, non-land. But if you don't pick something, you can just put 2 counters on a thing, which is actually pretty big, right? Because you can use this late game after their hand's empty. You could just play it and just not choose to take anything, but you still get to see their hand, even if you just want the +2/+2. I don't know if this goes in a particular deck, but I do just like that it's a discard card with 2 options to it, so it's never really dead. Twisted Embrace, 2 colorless, black. It's an enchantment or a enchant an artifact or a creature you control. When this card enters the battlefield, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls. As long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets +1/+1. So this is just a sorcery speed destroy a creature or planeswalker, but has an upside of giving one of your creatures +1/+1. I mean, if you're willing to play a removal card at sorcery speed, I mean, I guess this is fine, right? I mean, this card's wild. I mean, like, it's not the greatest thing. We have other stuff that destroys creatures and planeswalkers at, like, instant speed and stuff, right? So there are better choices, but to be able to pump a creature and just kill something is actually pretty nice. If nothing else, this is going to be a very good card for limited players, for sure. Crackling Emergence, colorless and a red. Enchant a land you control. Enchanted land is a 3/3 red spirit creature with haste. It's still a land. If enchanted land would be destroyed, Instead, sacrifice the enchantment, and that land gains indestructible until end of turn. I don't know how I feel about this. This seems like this is a card that feels like a trap card, not in like the Yu-Gi-Oh sense, but like you can play it on an early turn if you want to have a 3/3 attacker. It technically, I mean, I guess it really is a 3/3 haste creature later in the game if you needed it to be that. It is a spirit creature, which could also matter for various decks that care about spirits or enchantments, I guess, as well, because that's going to be a thing. Yeah, maybe this is a card. I mean, like if the enchantment decks end up being like, I don't know, Naya colors, this is a really viable thing you could play in those lists. And there's cards we've already seen that can return stuff from the great enchantments from the graveyard. So you could just have an infinitely alive 3/3 land, potentially. I don't know. But this card feels like it does something. We just got to figure out where it goes. All right, Kami's Flare, colorless and a red, instant. This card deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Kami's Flare also deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller if you control a modified creature. So yeah, if you're playing any type of these, like, you know, creature reconfigure things, anything with bonuses as far as auras or +1/+1 counters, this actually becomes a pretty reasonable removal card, right? Because now you don't have to choose. Like, the problem is with a lot of the burn is you have to choose to take efficient burn, meaning you're paying 1 or 2 mana to deal like 3 or 4 damage, but it's only to a creature or planeswalker, and you can't go upstairs and hit your opponent. Now you have the option of still getting to kill something, and your opponent takes 2 anyway, potentially. Obviously, you know, if you have another creature that has the bonuses or whatever, but I think this actually becomes a really playable card. It's not like a huge game changer, but it is good enough that you get the flexibility of getting to kill a creature and shoot the opponent, and that's pretty nice. All right, going down the list, this card just caught my eye. Careful Cultivation. 2 colorless and a green for an enchantment aura. You enchant an artifact or a creature. As long as enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets +1/+3, which is a pretty good size bonus, and has reach, which is awesome, and taps for 2 mana. I don't know why it does all these things for 3 mana, but it does. And then it also has channel, pay a colorless and a green, discard that card, and create a 1/1 green human monk creature token with tap, add a green. This is also good because if you do need to ramp up, you don't want to necessarily take a risk, or maybe you think they might kill your creature or whatever. Well, during the next turn, if you left mana up during their end step, you can go ahead and just discard this, make another creature that taps for mana. Next turn, you're going in a mana ahead. So it's actually pretty solid. Is it going to be super playable? I don't know, but this is a case where we talk about like auras need to be really good for you to spend 3 or more mana on them. And this one does 3 things. I mean, it gives you a sizable bonus, it gives you reach, which, you know, in a world of dragons or whatever is relevant, and it lets something tap for 2 green, which is also good. So yeah, I like all those things. And again, if you're playing a deck that already cares about enchantments, then there's a chance this is going to be even better. And then it just gives you the bonus of being able to make a ramp creature, basically a Llanowar Elf, which is pretty cool. So yeah, this is one I think could easily fly under the radar, maybe nothing, but it may turn out the decks that want it really want it, and it ends up being a superstar common. Commune with Spirits. 1 green, sorcery. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal an enchantment or a land from among them. Put it in your hand. Put the rest on the bottom. Random order. This is like every other card we see that says commune with something. Kind of just assume if you see a card that says commune with whatever and it's 1 mana in green, you're probably going to play it if you play that type of deck. So if you're playing an enchantment, creature, deck, whatever, cool. You play it because you're probably going to hit a bunch of enchantments and get your pick of what to take. So yeah, again, this card's pretty terrible. Unless you're playing that type of deck, then it's probably awesome. Season of Renewal. 2 colorless and a green. Instant. Choose one or both. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Return target enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. Usually I'm not a big fan of these cards, however, there's something very interesting here. The fact that our enchantment decks could very well have enchantment creatures, so you're going to have multiple choices to target in your graveyard, which is cool. And the fact that this is an instant, so you can wait until your opponent does something on their turn, maybe they play a sweeper or something, and you can immediately get 2 of the things back that just went to the graveyard. So I'm not sure I would play a lot of this card, but if this was like a 2 of in that style of deck, it would make a lot of sense to me. Cameo Safekeeping. 1 green, instant. Target permanent you control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. You gain 2 life. Yeah, this card's going to be a very highly played common. I mean, with the amount of spot removal and sweepers and everything else in the format right now, like having a card like this to just protect your best thing for 1 green mana is great. You can play it alongside either of the other cards that give something hexproof if you so choose. I think this is great. Honestly, you could have up to 8 things now for 1 mana that can protect your team pretty well. And getting the choice of indestructible, or, well, actually not even choice, just getting both indestructible and hexproof gives you the ability to be protected from more things. So, yeah, this gets a big thumbs up. All right, our first rare of the day, Eater of Virtue. It's 1 colorless. Nice. For legendary artifact equipment, whenever equipped creature dies, you exile it. Equipped creature gets +2/+0. As long as a card exiled with Eater of Virtue has... As long as a card exiled with Eater of Virtue has flying, equipped creature has flying. The same is true for first strike, double strike, all right, the other keywords. Wow, this is actually seems pretty reasonable. I mean, it's 1 colorless and 1 to equip. So it's kind of like, what was it? Bone Shredder or whatever, the old equipment. But you just get a straight up benefit. Like, here's the thing. As long as you're not planning on getting creatures back from the yard or whatever, and you're just good with them just dying when they die, like, this exiles the thing. So if your stuff has abilities, well, again, that's flying, first strike, death touch, double strike, indestructible, whatever, then cool. You start just piling up abilities on your sword that the next creature gets. Now, is that possible to do in any way right now? I don't know. There are a lot of cards with a bunch of random keywords. So maybe, but I think it's actually pretty sweet. And it's a cheap equipment. So decks that are looking for cheap equipment to play or cheap equipment costs could be looking at a card like this to throw in there. Patchwork Automaton. 2 colorless, artifact creature construct. It has Ward 2, it's a 1/1, and whenever you cast an artifact spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Patchwork Automaton. Very possible that this card could get played. I don't know that it will, but it makes sense, right? It's cheap, it's 2 for a 1/1. It does have Ward, so it's going to be hard to kill. And if you're playing a bunch of vehicles and other stuff, you're going to just be stacking up counters on this thing, or multiples, because they do trigger each other subsequently down the line. So that's kind of big too. Yeah, I mean, like, it's not great, but it's just good enough that I could see somebody trying to put it into a deck. Thundersteel Colossus, 7 mana, 7/7, artifact vehicle, trample, haste, crew 2. The only reason I put this up to talk about, because it's not stat-wise isn't great, like 7 mana is a lot. But if you can get into a state where you are putting this into play cheaply or ramping into it, a 7/7 trample haste is pretty significant considering it's only crew 2. So you're with almost anything on the board, you're going to be able to crew this thing. So could be good. I don't know. I think the 7 mana could hold it back, but if you can find a way to cheat it into play, could be pretty nice. All right, March of Swirling Mist. It's a X and blue for an instant. As initial cost, you can discard a blue card, make it cost 2 less. Up to X target creatures phase out. Oh, just straight up. That's what it. I was looking for more words. Nope, it literally is just X things phase out. This is actually really good. I mean, don't undersell this card actually, because being able to, let's say you are playing like a Simic aggro deck or splashing blue in an aggro deck of some kind, right? If you can just remove the blockers, 2 or 3 blockers for a turn, and get through with that last big attack, that's just going to end the game. And that's not hard to do. On a card like this, you're talking about paying 3 or 4 mana to remove relevant blockers and just keep getting in there, or remove their best ones and leave their worst one out there so it dies, that sort of thing. Or just basically force your opponent to block with the thing you want to die, right? You get rid of the others that are out there and they have to block with that one. So yeah, there's a lot of scenarios this could be. This could also protect your own things. Let's be honest, right? Like, it's very possible that your opponent goes to, I don't know, Meat Hook Massacre, and you're like, okay, cool, I'm just gonna make X2 and then just go ahead and prevent my 2 creatures from dying, right? So this is a good card. This really, it's subtle but good. Invoke the Agents. Agents. This isn't the Matrix. Invoke the Ancients. 1 colorless, green, 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 green. So 1 and 4 green for 5 total. Sorcery, create 2, 4, 5 green spirit creature tokens. For each of them, put your choice of a vigilance counter, a reach counter, or trample counter on it. Ooh, that is strong. So you can, oh, you get to pay 5 for 2 4/5s? Ooh. Ooh, that's good. That's good. I mean, like, the green decks don't have much. They're playing at 5 right now anyway. I mean, you can load up at 4 between like Chariot and Uvenwald Oddity. But otherwise, you really, that's kind of your top end. You're not really doing anything, right? A few were trying to squeeze in Ren and 7. But realistically, you could find a way to put 1 or 2 of these in the deck. Man, could you imagine with 1 ramp creature of some kind and then turn 4 have dropping 2 4/5s onto the board? Like, that's powerful. Wow. This is good. This is pretty good. Iganjo, Seats of the Empire. Legendary land, tap for a white. It has channel of 2 colorless and a white. Discard this card. It deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. This ability costs 1 less for each legendary creature you control. This is pretty good too. This is pretty versatile, right? Just be able to kill, like, it's a land or a kill spell. I mean, just a built-in kill spell. For, I won't say free, but uncounterable for the most part. So, yeah, this is likely playable as well. I'm not sure how many you play, but yeah, definitely playable for sure. All right, we have Kami of Transients, a colorless and a green for a 2/2. Spirit Trample. When you cast an enchantment spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of each end step if an enchantment was put into your graveyard from the battlefield. Oh, I think we reviewed this early on. It was put in your graveyard. This turn, you can return Kami of Ancient from your graveyard to your hand. Yeah. Yeah, again, I think if the enchantment decks are a thing, this card is actually worthwhile. If they're not a thing, then you're going to be trying to like trying to make fetch happen, and sometimes just not going to happen. But yeah, if the enchantment creature decks or whatever come together, this could be really good. Okay, and we have Jugen Defends the Temple, which is a really sweet piece of art there on this saga. 2 colorless and a green. This is mythic. Chapter 1 is create a 1/1 green human monk creature token with tap, add a green. So I guess that's going to be the motif for the monk tokens this set. Second chapter is put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. That's kind of nice. And then chapter 3, it returns into play as Remnant of the Rising Star. Flying. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay X, where if you do, put X +1/+1 counters on that creature. As long as you control 5 or more modded creatures, Remnant of the Rising Star gets +5/+5 in trample, and it starts out as a 2/2. So yeah, like this is one that's actually pretty solid, right? The first level the first chapter gets you a creature, which also helps you ramp up to your next big thing, so that's not bad. Then the next one, you get to put 2 counters on things to make stuff bigger, which is kind of nice, because where it's almost like you're taking a turn off to just play a 1/1 on that previous turn, you're actually getting to pump your other team and possibly get a bigger, higher spell, getting ahead on mana the following turn. And then you get to flip this over, and hopefully, maybe, the next time you play a creature, you have mana available that you can start using its ability to pump up your team. So, yeah. I think if there's a question, it's just what deck wants this, right? Is this a green deck thing? Is this a legendary creature deck thing? Is this not really a creature deck, but maybe a token deck thing? Like, I don't know. There's a lot of questions. Like, this is one of those cards that like I think is good, but how playable depends on if the meta fits right or the right deck comes along that can actually use all these abilities. Oh boy, this has been a heck of a journey with this set. Mostly because I'm not a Kamigawa person. I've never been like huge on the motif they gave us, the flavor. I wasn't a big fan of a lot of the cards the first go round. But again, that was, I don't know, what are we talking about now? Like 17 years ago or something? So that's one thing. But generally speaking, this set has turned me around on that. Like the artwork's awesome. The flavor is different, which I think is kind of cool. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think there's a lot of new mechanics that make a lot of sense. I don't think anything in this set is hard for people to digest. Even if you're a beginner to mid-level player, these should all be easy to figure out very quickly and how they function. I like the channel ability. I think it gives a lot of cards that are kind of on the fence that you would maybe never play, at least gives them an opportunity to possibly see play. And it gives you a way to get around some counters and stuff late in the game to still get some value on some different cards or make creatures or whatever the case may be, right? So that's all pretty good too. So I'm on board with that. I'd be interesting to see if the vehicle decks come together because I think there's a lot of vehicles. I think there's a lot of stuff to support those decks. So that could be very good too. I mean, yeah, there's just a lot of opportunity, you know. And I guess the biggest question is, because everybody wants to know every single set, do you think that this set's going to change how all the other decks, blah, blah, in the format? Like, I don't know. I don't think any of us can answer that for you totally. But the reality is, this set at least brings a lot of stuff that's different to the game, right? And, you know, what is it? Teferi's Protection or whatever the card is? That alone could really help shape a lot of decks. You know, where you're talking about Gruul or Teamer or whatever, something that's just splashing green, being able to have that resilience as a creature deck right now would be very, very good. Now, again, there's cards that exile and everything else. You can't do much about that. But, you know, there's also a lot of things that target, and it could really protect you from a lot of that stuff. So, lots of good little filler cards, a lot of things to fix up old decks. There's going to be a lot to think about. I'm going to try to get y'all, like I said, those decks, a couple of them a day over the next few days leading up to the set release. So everybody has some like 10 to 15 decks to work with. That's kind of a regular MO. But I don't really know what this is going to look like. I mean, there's going to be a lot of thinking and processing. There's a lot of cool cards here. And it's kind of an exciting set. I mean, I think the last two had a lot of fun cards, but they were all themed to kind of just that set. Whereas I feel like the stuff here in Kamigawa is themed or is created in a way that it works within the themes of the set, but they also work well with other cards that are not part of the set. And think about this. This is a set that can set a lot of groundwork because we have a lot of interesting stuff coming the rest of the year. Especially when we consider New Capenna might have some interesting stuff. It might have some enchantment-based things or artifact-based things, depending on which way they want to go with it. We know for sure that the Brothers' War is going to be about 2 artificers, so there's going to be a lot of artifacts there. So even if your artifact-based decks or your vehicle-based decks are not spectacular right now, well, in another 9 months, they might be. You know what I mean? Like, so we've got a lot of stuff kind of happening here that can really work with cards throughout the year, and that makes this one a little more exciting than some of the most recent sets. But yeah, now that the whole set's out, y'all let me know how you felt about this. Like, was there any type of deck you're looking? Well, actually, answer me that. Like, what deck are you looking for first? Like, what are you planning to build? What are you most interested in? Because I think that can help shape the content here as well. But yeah, just so much good stuff. I'm kind of curious what y'all's opinion are now that we have all 302 cards or whatever it was, weird number, but you know, 300 plus cards out, because I feel like there's a lot to talk about. And always, I like to ask, if you haven't yet, I know some of you are asking, do you have a Patreon? No, we don't, but we do have memberships right here on the YouTube channel that are just like Patreon, and we have 3 levels. For as little as 99 cents, you can support the channel, so check those out, please, with that join button. And if you don't do that, at the very least, please remember to like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, and choose all notifications so you don't miss those deck lists I've got coming, because they'll be coming fast and furious. But that's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.